Welcome to Around the Fire, a space for conversations to nurture hearts and build lives following Jesus, thinking more deeply about big ideas and how to apply them.
Oh no, look out. That was Sarah.
Hiya.
I am Jonny. You're very, very welcome.
Need more coffee.
Do we? Or have we had too much? We are in the throes of a conversation around some of our theme for 2025, Walking Well, and we're thinking about the Old Testament book of Micah. We did a bit of an intro episode just before this one, and for today we are going to have a poke around chapter 1. We're going to see what Micah chapter 1 is saying. So if you don't know how or why you've ended up here, good luck. Sarah and I have the privilege of leading as part of a team at Eden Life Church in North Birmingham in the UK, and we come with many, many years of pastoral and practical experience.
Don't you say many, like, you know, we're not, well, I am
we
old,
are
yeah,
now.
okay, carry on.
And so we are not claiming to be like biblical scholars or experts. This is formed by our practice in community. That's what is important to us.
My furious researching of commentators.
Google, burning out Google.
Come on.
But so hopefully this is a conversation that is useful to you in real life. And so we will do our best to steer it towards something resembling real life.
Yeah, so like stick with us. We'll meander, but we'll pull it in at some point. I was going to say I promise, but I can't promise that. That's what we're hopeful for.
But the point of these conversations is that they are kind of the meandering path. They are the space to get lost in the weeds a little bit. They're not supposed to be Sunday communication. We end up preaching sort of regularly on these spaces, which is not really what they're for. But we get a bit excited and old habits kick in.
We're working some of this stuff out in real time. Like, so you see us going, as we go along. So it's not that we do come with some sort of prayerful preparation, but it's not that we arrive with a script or anything like that.
Which we hope is serving you well as you are connecting with these.
Everyone's like, we know you haven't arrived with a script. We can totally tell.
So in these sprawling conversations, we have, just really, really quickly recap, we think about Micah. It's an Old Testament prophecy. We are claiming it as like sermon notes.
Yeah.
I am claiming that as like after the fact. Somebody's compiled those for us. There is some very definite structure to the communication. 7 chapters, which is why it's towards the end of the Old Testament. They're just organised by size, really.
Yeah. One of the 12 that are known as the minor prophets, which literally just means that they are shorter books than the major prophets.
And so that's where we are. We are around 740 something BC to 680 something BC, date stamped by the kings that are identified at the start of the chapter. So really, really long time ago. Structure of the book, we kind of see these 3 cycles, which we're going to talk about now, because chapter 1 and 2 are kind of the first cycle of these 3 cycles in the book. And generally speaking, the people of God have walked away from the ways of God. And so the voice of God, the heart of God, the prophet is calling for the course correction. And it's got really bad. Yeah. It's got really, really bad. And
we're at the point where I think we said in the last episode, it's not that attention is being drawn to what they're doing that's wrong. It's like attention is being drawn, and it's like now wrong. There's consequence. Yeah. Now God's going to respond to that, and there's this sort of bad news with a little glimmer of good news kind of dynamic that Micah uses as we go through the book. It's like, so this is what the trouble is, this is why you're in trouble, this is how God's going to respond, and then this sort of thread, this glimmer of like hope that God is at work in all of this.
Yep. So in chapter 1, I want
to us.
to just set up some things that I hope will be helpful, and then we're going to get into some of the specifics. Yeah,
because as you read it, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of really evocative, provocative language and imagery. There's like fires and pouring and mountains melting, like it's
obscure place names.
Yes, really like big ideas and big names and thanks. And we're done. No, we're not. Carry on.
So to set us up to win, we are going to encounter throughout Micah talking to 2 divided places as one whole. That's part of prophetically what he's doing on purpose. So
because you belong to each other, even though politically, religiously, and geographically, you've kind of disconnected and separated many centuries ago.
The promise is one.
Yeah, God looks at you as his people.
Hero as well.
Yeah.
The Lord our God is
one.
Which is like, he doesn't say that, but that's implied through all of this, which is doing echoes of covenant invitation. So we're mountains, which is supposed to be evoking like where the covenant was given. You're supposed to know these stories when you're interacting with this, right? So we are going back up the mountain, which is important for all those reasons. We are talking to the people of God as one united people.
Yes.
They're not. They're not, but it's a prophetic picture and a prophetic kind of preach that is being given. And so Micah is speaking to these divided kingdoms as one on purpose.
So that's why if you can't remember from the last episode, that's like Jerusalem and Samaria are like the twin centers of power in those two kind of divided kingdom. And so he speaks to both.
So let's jump straight in. Verse 5. And why is this happening? We'll go back as to what's happening. Because of the rebellion of Israel. So that's the bit that's immediately drawing attention to what isn't already.
Yes.
So that's some of your translations might say Jacob. Interchangeable. We'll talk about that a different day. But the people of God is how we would recognize that. Yes, the sins of the whole nation. And now we go, oh, okay.
Yeah, he's talking to everyone now. No one is kind of like escaping this
and just in
confrontation.
Just in case you weren't sure, he says, who's to blame for Israel's rebellion? Samaria is capital. So then the South's going, phew, where's their centre?
It's not us, woohoo!
And then he goes, where's the centre of idolatry in Judah? That's the South. In Jerusalem, it's capital. And now everybody goes, oh no.
Biscuits.
It's all of us.
None of us have done a good job here.
Yeah, so Micah is speaking to two separate kind of kingdoms as one whole on purpose, reminding them of what their covenant kind of invitation was. They weren't invited to be two separate kingdoms. They weren't invited. Some commentators talk about like covenant adultery that's happening here. So the people of God are, which is like consistent language through Scripture. The pictures that we see of the partnership of the Creator and the creation, the institution of marriage is often used to communicate that story. And so often when the people of God stop behaving like the people of God, the prophet, the voice, the heart of God will use this really evocative and provocative language of like, you're committing adultery. And you're supposed to feel that as obtusely
you're supposed
as
to be
it
in
is.
that, as married people, a covenant
faithful
and promise
to each other.
and vow to be faithful to one another. It's that sense of God's people not being faithful to their agreement with God and all that God has invited them into.
You're stepping outside of your vow.
Yeah, so that's just another way of kind of using that. So if you ever see that language in Scripture, that's usually kind of what it's speaking to, isn't it?
Yep. And we pick up some of those themes in Micah. We pick up a lot of those themes in Micah.
And he personifies places as well.
Yes.
So like he, and again, you see this through Scripture. So a place becomes as if it's got character, as if God's speaking to it, because often places then represent people. But even in like, he talks of Samaria as her streets and her walls, and so it's this. He's wanting people to go, no, this is, I want this to land with you. I want you to understand that this is for you and towards you, but it's this sort of poetic language to help us do that.
Yep. And so that starts from verse 1. The Lord gave this message to Micah of Moresheth. Moresheth? How do you say it?
Moresheth.
Thanks.
But I don't know. I'm just like saying it fast in a Welsh accent.
Yeah.
If I said it really Welsh, Moresheth. No, let's not do that. Carry on, move on.
So we are outside of capital cities here, which is important.
Yeah, so Micah's probably, some commentators think it's about 25 miles outside of the city, a bit more rural, that kind of idea.
Very, very rural. And again, we've talked about this a little bit. Micah is a person, and so his art is reflective of his experience, which is contrast. And so he knows the rural life, but he knows the suburban life. He knows the countryside. He knows the city. He knows...
Because his role is, he is a professional prophet in that sense. This is his job. So even though he's from and lives and is from a different community, he is...
It's got to go where the people are. It's got to go where the power is.
Where the centres of power are.
Which is the city.
Yeah.
And so that's being set up for us from the beginning. So we begin to we're seasoning our reception of the story with place, which is a way of teaching us about people. Great, good, we're happy with that. So this voice from outside is speaking to the inside. The fringe is speaking to the core, which is often the way of the prophetic, right? So it can't correct itself from inside. It can't fix itself.
Yeah.
So something from outside has to be brought in to bring that correction. And that's being set up here. So attention, verse 2, let all the people of the world listen. So who's this for? All the people of the world.
Hi, everyone. It's you and me and all of the people of the world at the time.
And just in case you were going, well, that's only speaking of the ancient world. Verse 2.
I like that voice.
Verse 2b, let the earth and everything in it hear.
Yeah.
So we're all...
It's basically like massive attention-grabbing language, isn't it? It's like, this is a specific communication to a specific group of people at a specific time, but there are resonances and values and ways of being that by using that language, Micah's like, we got to pay attention. We've got to listen to what's going on. And even some of that, like that language of grabbing, like in the NLT, it says attention. In other versions, it might say woe to you, you know?
Here.
It's got like, listen, or, you know, all of that kind of language. It's very, it's quite...
Oi.
Yeah, oi. It like literally means hoy, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's like, oi, I'm trying to grab your attention, you know?
Yep.
It's not polite.
No.
It's not meant to be polite, I don't
It's
think.
loud, it's forthright.
Yeah.
And chapter 1 is really general. So it's really wide, really broad. And this is some of the brilliance of the literature. And that he starts really, really wide. And we're going to talk about this in the next episode, because you have to start really, really wide, because he's giving this general awareness and instruction and being like, hey, everyone, we're out of step here.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to think of a contemporary equivalence without making this political. This could be, I'm not picking sides, but what's a contemporary equivalent? Like, this is a conversation that we are having in contemporary culture around the weather. This is like, hey, there's some general awareness around climate.
Yeah.
Now, very few people are actioning the general conversation. So Micah does the general broad, hey, the whole earth needs to hear this. And the people in power, in time and place, are like, meh. So he then becomes more specific with his correction.
Yeah, not so much me. That's fine. I don't need to listen to this. In fact, you see that as Micah goes through. You see the people kind of discounting themselves on this, going either, oh no, God won't really deal in consequence with us. Like, it'll be fine. We'll sort of escape that. Or, nah, it doesn't really apply to me. Whereas what we're saying and what we see here in the text is like, oh no, he's wanting to get the attention of humanity as a whole and go, hey, there's things we need to understand about who God is, about what it looks like to walk well with him, and about how God will kind of bring consequence to that and what that means. And so that's the stuff that unfolds. There's been this rebellion and God's like, I'm calling you on it now. Like, this is it. And I think what's fascinating about then how it unfolds, it's like the sovereign Lord, he's speaking from his holy temple, the Lord has come in, he leaves his throne in heaven, tramples the heights of the earth, and then this picture of the mountain. You're right, people are meant to go, there's a mountain and there's fire and there's smoke. Oh, that reminds me of when
what other story do I know?
Yeah. So what's the story that reminds you of? That reminds you of the story of God bringing these boundary lines, these rules or laws or commandments, however you want to describe them, to a particular person, Moses, at a particular mountain, Sinai. All of that is like this evocative image of when the covenant was agreed, like this agreement of like this marriage picture between God and his people. But what's fascinating about this is that Micah is not like, oh, God's coming to like make a new covenant or renew that covenant. He's coming to go, you have not kept up your side of the covenant, and so now there are consequences.
And by using language that taps into one people, one nation, one God, which is not how they're living. And so super general. This is to all. Hear and listen. Like, everyone's supposed to be getting this. Really, really like, hey, actions have consequences. Like, that's what we're being set up to pick up. Here, kind of to understand some of what's happening. And then it gets pretty terrifying pretty quickly. So we're setting up the sovereign Lord is making accusations against you. The Lord speaks from his holy temple. So this is, again, messing with, like, yeah, we know, like, we're in charge of that. Like, that's what we're responsible for.
We've got the centers of the temple in our community.
Now Micah's saying, God's somewhere you're not. Like, God is other. God is elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's now starting to make people nervous. Look, the Lord is coming. The assumption is, well, he's already here, because we sort of gatekeep God.
Because in that context and culture, they would have understood the presence of God to be contained to a specific place.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now it's not that.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
But he's coming.
Uh-oh. If that means he's not here, so what have we all been doing? Look, the Lord is coming. He leaves his throne in heaven. Now, I don't think you're supposed to take this too literally. Remember, these are sermon notes. This is hyperbolic. This is painting big pictures.
Oh, yeah, it's big preacher language, isn't it?
It's
also meant to be like throne is a picture of authority, isn't it? So it's like he is from a place of authority. He's now responding to humanity and to this group of people.
Yep. And so action is moving towards you. Divine action is moving towards you. The play. It's not, again, let's work hard to undo maybe some of our cultural overlays of, like, this is not a tired old man getting out of his armchair. Like God's coming.
There's energy, there's impetus, there's movement. It's dramatic. It's powerful. It's meant to, drawing on some of those pictures of, like, the mountain that it goes on to talk about, like, in that original story, the people were so terrified of it that they sent Moses up and they were invited to go up the mountain, but they didn't want to because they were like, God is so awesome and to be revered, and we're a little bit afraid of what that means. And so we're going to send a representative up for us instead. And so all of this imagery is I think, also helping you go, no, remember who God is. Like, remember how powerful he is. Remember he's in charge, like sovereign Lord, all the earth. Like, he's over everything. He's in charge of everything. Remember who he is. And perhaps we've, like, tried to justify our behavior and forget him or ignore him or, like, put him on the back burner, or, like, he's somewhere in the corner of my eye over here, but I'm not really going to pay attention to what he's saying or who he is. And Micah's like, no, I just want to bring this front and center. Like, pay attention. This is God. This is who he is, and he's coming to speak.
Yeah, and
it's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the creation's response to the Creator: the mountains melt beneath his feet. Like that's all the things that you've just said. Absolutely. And then in time and place, maybe had a nearer possession through other, like, belief systems and understandings of, like, well, maybe nature is our God and determines what happens. Oh, no. Like, Yahweh is God of gods. Like, anything that you thought had power over your life melts in front of God.
Yeah. And also, like, in that context, like, little side note, we have an idea of, like, mountains in our world and what that means. So we have to, like, move away from, like, nice pictures of what that is to use that word. It was like those were almost seemingly immovable objects. You know, they were earthly images or metaphors of something foundational, and, like, even that has to, like, melt and bow before God.
Yeah, like, it's like wax melting before a fire. Like, that's
water pouring down a hill.
Like, in contrast to the authority and the power of God, which is what you're supposed to be getting. Like, the things that are immovable and unshakable in our world just melt like wax in front of a fire. Yeah. Like,
biscuits. Okay, maybe I should start paying attention.
And flows into the valley, like, the earth is opening up, like, the things are moving. Why is this happening? Like we've just talked about, because you've come outside of the thing that you're supposed to do. Who's responsible for that? You are, and you are. By the way, that's all of you together. And then there's some value now in starting to pick at these place names particularly. So Samaria is synonymous with luxury.
Yes, opulence.
Opulence. Samaria is prosperity. Samaria is, like, if you think of where all the culture vultures are going to be, like, where all the
centers of financial power,
everything, like, is rocking and rolling in Samaria. Like, that is the place to be. And we are supposed to know that, and we're supposed to expect that. We're supposed to lean into, like, it's New York, it's London, it's Paris, it's Sydney. Anywhere else you can think of? It's like, it's doing all of those things. That's the image that we're supposed to have. So you're culpable. And then Jerusalem, you talked about this in the last one, so I don't want to go back over what we've talked about. So then that is the center of the promise. That's that's where God's going to be.
Yeah, that's meant to be the center of kind of the presence of God, of religious purity and honoring of God. And
the purposes of God are going to be like, so the imagination at this point of like, the intention of Yahweh is outworked there.
Yeah.
That's what's supposed to happen there.
Yeah.
So you've got the business, the culture, that capital of the world in one half, and then you've got the religious center of the world on the other half.
Yeah.
Like, they are now being spoken to as a whole, which was always the intention. Like, one people, one God, one nation. And they're being reminded of that as the mountains, the very thing that gave them the thing that they're not doing, disappears in front of the Creator. So everyone's now supposed to be paying attention. Nobody is, by the way.
Yeah, this is why he just gets more and more specific, right? He's like, okay, so I need to double down on this. I need to kind of help you understand that this is for you. And so we will kind of skip over the bits where he talks about himself mourning and lamenting the life of a prophet. But he talks, this is such evocative language, like, for my people's wound verse 9 is too deep to heal. It has reached into Judah, even to the gates of Jerusalem. And so he's like, this is like I read a commentator and it's like a festering wound that has become sepsis for the whole, in both places that were supposed to, or had set themselves up as the centers of life for those communities. He's like, it's like a festering wound. It's like sepsis. It's like death essentially is coming.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm not just showing you, there's now going to be consequences. And then he has this run of place names. You've got something really interesting from a commentator to help us understand what that means, right?
Yeah. So let's round out this message that's happening. So this is being set up. The prophet is saying, so there's something that we can understand. God treading over high places is a way of saying God is in charge militarily, God's in charge politically, God's in charge physically, God's in charge spiritually. Like, God is speaking over all things. Like, we, again, our tribe, we like this language of over. We quite often talk about banners, which is complicated in contemporary culture. But it's that idea of like, God is over all things. And so what's if you are in 748, what does that look like? Oh, God walks over the mountains. You're like, oh, God's in charge of everything. Yeah, is what's being said. Then he's acting, he's moving, and what is luxury, what is prosperity, is the promise from the one who is over everything that's about to become a pile of rocks. Yeah,
it's a reversal, isn't it? It's like, now you're going to be rubble, now you're going to be ruin.
Like, the city is about to be turned into zip. And like, so who's saying that? Somebody who lives a rural existence, like somebody from that countryside existence is coming into, so somebody who lives in the fields and the fens is coming into the city of London and saying, you see all of this? All of this, everything that is making your world go round is going to look like where I live. Yeah. It's going to look like a field. Yeah. Like, is going to be turned upside down. There's going to be not a brick to put on top of another brick. And which is why people are like,
yeah,
bro, like,
yeah, it's not going to happen.
Have a look around.
Yeah, we've heard this before.
Seems to be going quite well.
Yeah, thanks very much.
That's the promise.
Yeah, because though that imagery of like his streets will be ploughed up for planting vineyards is this sense of everything will disappear. And the image of vineyards in that context and culture is quite dry and it's arid, and there's lots of space, and there's no buildings, there's no commerce, there's no industry. It is this, this picture of like, it's going to all come to nothing. And not only that it's going to come to nothing, but you're not even going to be, like, the signs of where it was are all going to be smashed and moved away. Yeah, roll her stones into the valley below. So it's all going to disappear.
And to help make that point, uses 9 of the surrounding towns. So like, there's this radial group of towns from the centre out. The centre, because how can a capital be a capital if there's nothing for it to oversee? It has no authority if there's nothing to rule over, right? Yeah. And so to make the point as if its removal in itself, whether literal or figurative, so whether that's a picture of the Assyrian army or whether that is a prophetic picture of God removing God's self from, it's probably both, right? Because that's always the answer I'm happy with. But if that wasn't threat enough, now any of the like legitimacy and validity of you as a capital is going to be removed, because you haven't got anything radial, if you haven't got anything surrounding, if you haven't got anything to rule over.
Your capital city's gone, also then where you might have gone to find something, that's all going to go to.
We can take that away as well.
Yeah.
And then Micah...
So what you might have relied on. So the centre has been removed. So perhaps if you've relied on what that can provide for you, is going to be removed. And then you might go, oh, that's okay, because we've got neighbouring towns, we've got places we can go to. God's like, no, the earth, everything.
I think it's that, and I also think it's like it's the practical elements of that. Yeah. And I think it's the legitimacy of that as well.
Okay.
Of like, so for where we are, so you could, so we live in a part of the UK where we have the biggest council in the country.
Yeah.
So there's one council that oversees the biggest kind of area, which is a terrible decision, and in real life doesn't work very well. But the parallel here could be, well, you could get rid of Birmingham city centre, but like West Brom would still be okay, or like Halesowen would still be okay, or like those radial places, Solihull would still be okay. And because the city council gains its administrative legitimacy by overseeing all of those boroughs, you lose your legitimacy by your boroughs being removed as well. So like, I think there is the immediacy of the practicalities. If you've got nowhere to go to, you can't move the capital over one. So there's that. But there's also your administrative legitimacy is removed by having these radial things taken away from you as well. Yeah. And so Micah, in the escalation of this warning, uses really... uses wordplay to communicate this. So he uses like puns for some of the names. Yeah. He uses sounds with some of them. He uses meaning for some of the others.
Yeah, so like for every place name and the kind of corresponding description or effect or consequence, in the original language, it was like playing on those word names.
Which we won't get.
No, because we don't.
Neither of us speak Hebrew and wouldn't do a good job. So one commentator instead, this commentator's Scottish, and so uses Scottish...
My mum will be happy.
...place names to help us as moderns understand. So this isn't what the text says, but this is a contemporary equivalent to help us understand the devices that Micah is using to make this point. So this commentator says, Creef will know grief, Forfar will forfeit, Crail will be frail, Wick will be burned, Stornoway will be blown away, Edinburgh will be no Eden, for Tain there will only be pain. It's that thing that Micah is doing.
Yeah. So that like rhythm and
with place names, so people would have known what the place names meant or what they were famous for or their industry and then he's using pun or he's using mnemonic devices or word sounds to communicate this prophetic communication of removal, which is why we receive a long old list of place names, but it doesn't flow like that to us. So we get the general kind of warning, and then
and some kind of translations of the Bible will have like loads of asterisks. Asterixi? I don't know what it is.
Don't know.
We'll kind of give you some of that information like in the footnotes to be like, oh, that's what
in
he
example
means this.
Verse 11, you people of Shafir go as captives into exile naked and ashamed, and we go, oh, that doesn't sound great. That doesn't work in English, but the place name means pleasant. Well, that's an unpleasant experience. So even if you translate the place name, it still doesn't really work because the language doesn't work the same because it's a different language. That's okay. Like that, we're not missing anything. It just somebody has done their best to help us understand, and then we do the wider reading to be like, oh, okay. If you were able to understand this in the original language, you would pick up faster some of what's being put down.
So for example, the people of Maroth anxiously wait for relief, but only bitterness awaits them as the Lord's judgment reaches even to the gates of Jerusalem. The idea of Maroth is similar to like the word for bitterness.
Sounds like bitter.
Bitter. So it's kind of like, it's such a clever thing that Micah and those who are compiling his notes are doing, because to that original audience, that original kind of those who are reading it or hearing it, it would have become, it would be like going Birmingham, London, Manchester, Liverpool, like Newcastle, Belfast, Edinburgh, like place names that would be like really well known, perhaps in your cultural context, to be like, no, there's going to be a consequence for you too, and there's going to be a consequence for you too, and there is a consequence for you too. And so you're taking that, the world, the earth, and you're bringing it down to, well, this is for you too.
I want to do one more before we go to the brain break.
Go on.
Because there's a little moment where, verse 10, don't tell our enemies in Gath.
That's good. Go.
Don't weep at all. Gath means tell, so there's that happening. But Gath also, the people of God know the story of Gath.
Yes.
They get beaten up in Gath.
Yeah.
And so
they would be seen as enemy people. Yeah.
And so what Micah is doing is reminding them, remember this mountain where the rules were, where the covenant was issued, where the invitation was given, one people, one nation, one God. Remember that? Remember that story? Remember how we've dined out on the success of those that have gone before us? He's speaking...
that God's presence brought us blessing and favor, and
then he starts
helped us against enemies.
So then he starts using Israel, which is Davidic language of like bringing one people, one nation, one God. And then he uses another Davidic reference, but this is Davidic shame. They got beaten up by the Philistines in Gath.
Yeah.
And so he's seasoning the pot again with like, if you know your story.
Yeah. Remember when we don't walk well with God, what happens?
Yes.
Like remember that God will only allow so much before he brings the consequence in. Yeah.
So if you want to read some of that story, because don't tell Gath basically is a direct quote from 2 Samuel, where that story happens. So if you want to like backfill your own kind of remembering of that story, but that's being done on purpose. The layers of retelling.
And if you're interested in finding out like some of like what's going on in the narrative along that, it is places like 2 Samuel and 2 Kings and that kind of place where some of the parallel stories, again, any good kind of commentary or often it's referenced in the Bible. If you're like, because that might be quite an interesting way to read Micah, is to read it and then to go back and read the narrative of what's happening to the people in real time under these kings, under these rulers. You'll kind of, that might be a helpful way of you kind of approaching it and going, so this was about real people in real time, but it is also like this thing that you often say, Jonny, that this universal truth of like that invitation to walk well with God and walk in God's ways and the consequences of coming outside of that.
Yeah. Which I found interesting, and I think is helpful for us to pick up the layers because we are understandably so far removed from this stuff.
Yeah.
We're like, what? Like,
and also like reading place names in the Bible is not everyone's favorite thing.
It's hard work, man.
I was recently asked to read something publicly, and I had like 9,000 like people's names and places, and I was like, why did I say yes to this? It's not always but I think once you start to understand that this is a device that Micah is using and those who compiled it are using to get attention and go, God is doing something here and there's something specific and we don't always get that. It is a little bit like when you read poetry, you can learn how poetry is created and formed and structured. And so when you read it, you can have like a bit of a sense of, maybe it doesn't mean that. Maybe it's using a metaphor or an idea to tell us something. And that's what's happening with place names here and there. Yeah,
really good. Let's have a break. We are going to have a stretch. We'll see if Sarah puts a jumper on today or not. That's a callback
I'm
to
like,
previous episode.
Kind of jacketed up. We're good.
We're going to check on producer Andy's well-being. And
he's going to check on ours. He's just listened to the first half of this, right?
Yeah. And we'll be right back. Welcome back. I hope you've had a good brain break. And this is the opportunity we use to encourage you to subscribe, to share, to comment, to
like.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's still
do all
weird.
that.
I feel like I might be like 20th century on some of this
stuff.
stuff.
If you're on YouTube, great. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Hiya.
If you are listening only, then thanks. I hope your headphones are comfortable. you've got questions, awarenesses, thoughts, what are your interactions with the book of Micah? Like, how often are you reading this stuff? What haven't we talked about? What have we got wrong? Where is it helping you? What's it pointing you towards? Could you let us know? Podcast.
Yeah, because we're going to kind of keep going into Micah a little bit longer, aren't we?
elimlifechurch.co.uk will help us in future episodes.
Sorry, I just absolutely talked over you. Do that again. How can people get in touch?
Podcast at elimlifechurch.co.uk.
Nice.
We are looking forward to seeing how you get on in our kind of initial first wave of testing with team and things. This is not somewhere people have been often.
No, and I think that's why it feels a bit different for how we're doing it. We wouldn't necessarily always go through something like line by line through a text or the big overview of something beforehand. But for our community, this is a new space that we're in. And I don't know that I've ever really gone through a prophetic book in this way, which is fascinating. And also, like, we plan our big themes for our community about 18 months out, 12 months out. And so when we were planning this way back when, we sensed that there was going to be, the Spirit of God bringing some life and resonance to it. But as we've got nearer to it and as we find ourselves, where we are at this point in 2025 and through this year, like, it just feels like even more, okay, God, there are things in here that will help you. There are things in here I want you to understand about who God is, about how he works, about what it looks like to walk in partnership with God, all of those things. And so we want it to be helpful. We want it to be something that you can go, it isn't just this like Bible code or this knowledge or this idea, now I know how to read a minor prophet. It's like, I wonder what the Spirit of God might want to say to me through this as I'm reading this, as I'm meditating on this, as I'm going, what does that place name mean for how consequence could look like in this space, but also in my life? So that's kind of some of the places we're coming from as well.
Yeah, what's the story of God and how can I know it and how can I tell it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what we're thinking about. So we have gone through, we've kind of seesawed a little bit. We've kind of jumped around the chapter, which is okay to help us understand perhaps some of what's happening. Chapter 1 belongs to chapter 2, so I just want to bring our attention to that.
Because otherwise you get the end of chapter 1 and you're like, this is so bleak. Yeah. But remember, we are getting it as it's been collated for us. It would not necessarily have come out in this format originally.
Yeah, so in the collection, we kind of have these 3 cycles probably. That's a fair grouping. I would agree with that. And so chapters 1 and 2 belong to each other in this first cycle of warning that Israel is kind of threatened with exile. And that's what we're seeing. And so if you remember, we're thinking about why this is going to happen. So they're being told, hey, this is what your sin has looked like. And then the consequence of some of that. And so we are coming from these established places of opulence and luxury and trade and the good life, and
where your sense of security has come from, and your sense of well-being has come from, and your sense of power or position or identity or influence has come from.
So all of that, and now all of that is being condemned and being kind of warned that it's going to be removed as we turn to rubble. And so we have a lot of pictures. We're keen to talk about from verse 8, where Micah kind of makes this very personal. He makes a shift from talking about Yahweh to talking about himself. And
it feels a bit like clunky because then he goes back to talking about others. But I think for me, I was just reflecting in the brain break. Like, that's a really interesting thing that Micah, he is outside of the... so he comes from rural into city, but he is still part of the people of God. And so often the prophetic warnings that come or the consequences that come through these human agents like Micah, they are also going to be affected by the consequences. So even if they haven't been directly responsible for it as a community, it's going to affect them. And Micah's response to this word, to this warning, to this awareness of we have strayed so far away from what God has for us, is to mourn and lament. And he uses this, he's like, therefore I will mourn and lament. I will walk around barefoot and naked. I will howl like a jackal and moan like an owl for my people's wound, my people's wound. Like, he's not separating himself out from this. He's like, this will affect me too. So he goes through all of those place names, it's going to affect you. But he's like, this is my people. For my people's wound is too deep to heal. It has reached into Judah, even to the gates of Jerusalem. And so I just think it's really... interesting that right at the start of like, this is who God is, this is why, this is what Micah is also experiencing his own response to that. And some of those ideas of like, well, how does this help us? How does this help us as we find and follow Jesus? I think it's giving ourselves space to look at perhaps the world, look at where human beings have failed and we've not kind of lived up to all that God has for us. And a very good response is to mourn that, is to lament that, and to bring that to God and say, like, this is not okay, and I see that. And I think sometimes, particularly because if you're watching this anytime around 2025, you will know that in the world of kind of church leadership and organizational leadership, we've seen lots of people get this wrong. This is, a lot of this is towards leaders at the start of this. And a lot of people have got things wrong. And I think you can end up feeling hopeless or despairing. And what I think Micah is doing, he's like, I'm mourning this. So I'm acknowledging that this is grief. Yeah. This is loss. This is painful. This is not what God has wanted. This has hurt people, but it has not honored God. And then lamenting it, like feeling that sense of sorrow at what's happened, rather than just moving to, and he does get to some little glimmers of hope, but to acknowledge that he is affected by this too, I think is actually something to pay attention to and go, oh, so when I look at what's happening in the world, I may not be directly responsible for that, or I may not be directly under the consequence of that, but I'm part of this community of God's people, and it affects me too. And so that response is to mourn and to lament, and to kind of pick us back up from where we've been as a community. Jesus in the Beatitudes, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted,
Yeah. The language is of somebody aware that maybe speaking from the fringe of what had been like mainline and mainstream, and aware that what happens next is loss. And so is prophetically and preemptively bringing attention to what happens now is grief. What happens next is sorrow. What happens next is nakedness is a picture of grief. Again, culturally, we don't do this as much, but like to tear your clothes, so that we've kind of got to the accelerated extremes of, I haven't got any. Like everything's been taken. Yeah. Everything has been taken.
Literally, like clothes off my back.
Clothes on my back have been taken. I have nothing. So it's not it's not it's not an exhibitionist kind of thing. It's not like, oh, this will get a write up, this will garner attention. It's an embodied practice and display of everything has been taken from me. I have nothing left. And then to the jackal, we don't really interact with that as an animal. It's not really a thing in our world. But jackals live in the wilderness. And so I'm making the sounds of the wilderness, which if you are, if you belong to the people of God at this time, you know the story of the wilderness. Yeah. So you've had the story of the mountain, you've had the story of David, now you're getting the story of...
isn't there?
Yeah, now you're getting the story of the wilderness, and you're like really supposed to be picking up what Micah's putting down, but he's making a noise from the wilderness like the wilderness, and in the place that was the remedy to all of those things.
Because they are in the promised land. They are in the place that God has promised them as he's rescued and delivered them, and the promise is to live in this land and to live out your life with God for his honor. Yeah.
And they are failing that hard. So would an owl then just be that sense of like darkness and nighttime and... Or ostrich, some translations might say. Yeah.
That's different.
They live in the wilderness.
Okay.
And so it could either be the sound, the noise, and so you hear that, or it could be, again, this continued picture of like, oh, they're the things that live in the place I don't want to live. Imagine you live in central London, and then somebody says to you, like, oi, the next noise you're going to hear is a barn owl. The next noise you're going to hear is what lives in the countryside. But like the next noise that you're going to hear are from the creatures that occupy the space that is unfamiliar to you. Like all of the things that you thought have sustained your existence. Like
you're going into the wild with Ben Fogle.
Right.
Like you're going to have to live off bridge.
Bear Grylls is called.
Yeah.
Off your pop. We're not claiming Bear Grylls is an exilic picture of waste.
Sorry, Bear Grylls. I don't think we can call him friend of the show, though, can we?
Bear. But yeah, it's that, right? It's those things of like, oh, you know of these things, but you don't live with these things. You're unfamiliar with these things. And the prophet is saying from the outside in, from where he lives into where they have been from, there are also repeating patterns of prophets here in that I'm speaking outside of what I'm informed enough to speak on here. So somebody correct me where this is wrong. But like this feels like a consistent picture of the prophets. Like this feels like John the Baptist to me. This feels like there are moments that may be easier for us to reach for of like, you're really weird and you're outside of my context. You're really like, you move differently, like you eat differently, you sound different, you smell different, you move different. You like, where are you from? Oh, like look at this cute little country bumpkin that's come in and told us all of our global mega systems are going to fail us. Like, oh, bless your heart. And then wouldn't you know it?
He's right.
He's right. There's a little bit of what that looks like. So, so then a couple of things, I guess, as we try and point this to contemporary culture and how this helps us on a Wet Wednesday. You might be the person in the thick of what is going well for you. Yeah. You might be the person who's like, this isn't going to go away. Like, this is life. I'm winning. Yeah. This is good. This is how this is all going to go. This is not then to prophesy doom or failure to your existence, but if it's not from or for God, it's going to go away. And what we are less good at, I think, is thinking generationally. And so it might not go away for you, but it will go away. And what's happening here, so remember, we're taking, and I think I'm going to talk about this a little bit more for chapter 2, but like, we don't have as high a level of functioning awareness of like how our assumption is we live in a city, and so the city is a composite of individuals. That's not what's happening here. They're being reminded, no, one people.
Yeah, you belong to each other and you belong to God.
One God, one nation. You're not a composite of individuals. You're one. And so if a bit of you's wrong, you're all wrong. And so
it's those collective pictures of what it is to follow God as well. And I think it back to our conversation with Kate a few episodes ago of like, we so often think of it in an individualistic way. And again, so this is another place in scripture where we go, oh no, we're not, it's not just about me and the consequences to my life. It is how I am a part of the whole of what God is doing as well.
That's why it matters. Yeah. That's why it matters, which I don't think we've got as good a working reference for.
I don't think so.
You might have a team dynamic of that, whether employment or sports or hobbies or whatever. You might be aware, like, I haven't played as well as I could have played today, and as a result, the team's lost. Like that, which is still a little bit too individual. But
just
like,
reminding myself of netball days. It's fine. Let's move on.
And so that's maybe not the cleanest parallel, because it's not about the externalizing or the effort or the performance, but you are one affects all, because God's not seeing these places as these composites of individuals. And we see these other points in some of these other narratives too, right? Of where there's consequence through separation, through choosing to turn our back on what's good. And so God's like, all right, then the actions are this. And then we hear the prophet or the remnant say, listen, if we can find 10 that are good, will we hang around? If we can find any, and God is sort of saying, good news, bad news. I don't see you like that, so we've got to start again. I don't see you like that. And so in these bigger narratives, so zoom right out, I don't see you like that. However, I'm going to provide one who can provide a way. And we go, oh, okay, now I know that story. Whether that's a flood narrative, whether that's a creation narrative, whether that's I'm thinking of Jonah now, whether that's in Micah, whether that's in Amos, whether that's in these moments.
You see some of these patterns through those prophetic stories as well.
For sure, because then we're supposed to see Jesus. And then we go, okay. There was one, but he doesn't identify. He is one, but he doesn't I am not saved because Jesus is outside or other. I'm saved because I am in Jesus. The whole. Yeah. Like Jesus has become flesh and blood, which is why we get into some New Testament language of like the firstborn or the new Adam or the high priest, because it's building off of all of these.
And the fulfillment of all of these things is found in Jesus.
All of these things. Yeah. So if you are the person who feels like you are city slicking in Samaria and you're like, I feel sorry for you guys.
I'm good. Peace out, bro.
But like, it's working for me. Like, I'm getting my piece of the pie and I've got more pies in the oven and I'm golden. You don't belong to just yourself. Whether you feel that or articulate that or believe that or not, that is what's true. You belong to humanity, which for now, for us in time and place is what matters. So the people of God are not limited to place. That not everybody believes that, but that's what I believe. The people of God are not the limits of Jerusalem or Samaria, but the Messiah is Jesus and has come and made a way for all people to, by faith, know God. So now the Spirit has been poured out on all flesh, in all places, at all times. And so you don't belong to yourself. We belong to each other. And that's not my like hippie preferences coming through here. That's just part of what we believe to be true. And that's not delineated by gender or race. That's not delineated by politics. That's not delineated by economics, which is the point of Micah, right? And so if you feel like
religiously,
like if you feel like I'm smashing it, bro, like I am absolutely on one. So sad for you, but like I'm golden. Like it might not be literally you, but it might be your neighbor, or it might be your children's children's children, or it might be the knock-on consequence of choosing not to live in a way that you're being invited to live in. And that's not to incite fear. That's to, again, the consequence of that is that ends in nothing. Like, and even if you feel like you're having a minute or you're having a moment, that like with 500 years deep, like there's some people that have done some life cycles that thought they were having a moment, but like across the whole piece, that turns out to be significant, that turns out to matter. Or you might be the person, your rent's gone up again. Or you might be the person that you don't feel you have autonomy or power to influence change in these moments. Like you
might feel like you're the one being exploited.
You might feel like I had what I needed to depend on God to sustain myself, and even that's been taken from me. Even that, whether that's literal, whether that's spiritual, whether that's relationally, whether that's
it might be
politically.
Things like in our world at the moment, there's a whole conversation around like who gets help when you have additional needs or disability, like, and who doesn't. So you might be facing some of those, like, what's going to happen? Where is that provision going to come from? That sustenance going to come from? Like, this is a very real and alive situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so contemporary. And so what the story of God told through the prophet of Micah tells us is that those who are exploiting others and removing them from their dependence, their faith in God to provide, to supply life, like that will be corrected. That will be made right. Now, we believe that has been made right in Jesus. We believe that
because we look at Micah through the lens of who Jesus is and what he's done.
And
that new covenant, that new agreement. Because although there is a new agreement here, it's all pointing to Jesus.
And so where we get to the end of chapter 1 and we go, that was a bit bleak. Like in living out our entire faith, like actually what that's pointing us to, even in the darkness of this moment, even as we're hearing the jackals and the owls or ostriches.
That has like messed with my head. Anyway, carry on.
We're hearing the echoes of what's exilic and what's waste and what's wild. So it's supposed to be telling you, guess where we're going? Like
back into the wilderness.
The world was wild and waste, like this Genesis language, it's Revelation language, and then out of the chaos, the Creator speaks order, speaks light, speaks life. And so if you feel like you are being exploited, if you feel like there are patterns, power structures and systems that are using religious performance to falsely plaster a veneer of legitimacy over their corruption or their kind of ungodly behavior, that is not ever the end of the story. God sees it, God speaks to it, and we are.
That's why the prophetic voice is needed. That's why God, like, raises up people and situations and voices and schools of thought around some of this stuff to speak into that, because he cares so much about it, right?
Yeah, because our hope is not in the system, our hope is in the Saviour. And we clearly articulate the Saviour as Jesus.
Yeah.
And so even as we get to kind of the end of quite a bleak chapter, wherever that finds you at either end of the scale, whether you're not shedding a tear for people who you think should be working harder or should be taking more risks or should be whatever, like maybe just tune that in to what the Spirit might be inviting you into, how we're treating our neighbours. And that's not about grandiose displays of like philanthropic or charity behaviour. That's like in the core of who you are. What do you feel when you see somebody who's not like you? What do you feel when you're annoyed? What do you feel like? Ask some of those questions. Or if you're like, I don't know how much more flat I could get. Like everything I thought I had has been taken from me. I don't know how much worse this could get. There is hope at either end of that scale. And that's why we come back to these ancient texts. That's why we come back to the story of God. That's why we come back to our God is not a God who is blind or absent to these things.
No.
Our God is aware
even
of...
in this, even in coming to bring consequence, he is moving towards people. And as we go through the book of Micah, you know, there's promise and there's hope.
And that is a holy and a fearful thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess, how does that speak to us on a Wet Wednesday? Well, where does that find you? Like, as you read about these systems, do you think, well, yeah, I mean, like everybody should be out to it's fair game and you take what you need, and if you're winning, keep winning and do your thing? Or do you feel disempowered? Do you feel ignored? Do you feel like blinded by a system that you can't seem to find a way into? So let's speak in very real terms. There are generations who are looking at a property ladder that they can't get a foot on a rung on. Like, how does that make you feel?
Yeah.
Where's God in that? Where does God like meet you in that? The lived reality that there are many that are not going to find security through the system that they have been told is the way out of a way of life. God's not unaware of that.
And distant to it. He's not distant to it.
Not far away from that. He's moving at pace towards injustice. He's always moving at pace through the person of Jesus and the empowerment of the Holy Spirit for the glory of the Father. He's moving at pace towards injustice to proclaim his glory. So I think that, what does that look like on a Wet Wednesday? It is a bit ethereal. It is a bit floaty clouds, man.
No, but I think just even naming and acknowledging that these are realities for people, and if they're not for you now, they might be at some point. Do you know what I mean? Like that wherever we find ourselves, perhaps in that spectrum, that it is an invitation to look and go, okay, God, where am I? How does that find me? What does that look like? How does that affect me? And what is the invitation of the Spirit in response? Because there will always be an invitation of the Spirit in response to injustice or exploitation, whether you are partly complicit in it or whether you feel like you're at the mercy of that system. I think there's an opportunity. I think one of the things I read a commentator saying about this Micah is that it's this reflecting and resetting moment of like, here's what's happened. God is going to reset this and reform and reshape. But like, you're being told, so you have an opportunity to respond to God in this. I think that you see some of that as Micah unfolds. When the things that you rely on go away, like what do you do? Well, you come back to Jesus and you go, okay, how does this find me? So I think that's a really helpful question.
And remember, Micah is using pictures of contrasts to bring the communication. So rural to city, opulence to desolation, your favourite, like the... what do you say? Rubble in the ruin?
Yeah, rubble in the ruin.
Yeah, like...
Rebellion, rubble and ruin, that's what you see.
Yeah, and so that's as a genre... like the glissando on the genre, will slide in. That's what they are tools that are being used to evoke these responses in us. So even if you can't potentially like patch in with the place names or you're like, so it rhymes. So what? Like,
nice guys.
Use the tools that are being worked with skill here, to pick up some of what is being put on the table for us. Like those big, heavy pictures of contrast, those big, heavy a prophet that lived through heavy generational pendulum swings.
Well, because like Micah was through 3 kings, right? So 3 different rulers and ways of ruling, and
imagine living through a time where governments change really, really quickly and in really, really extreme ways. If only we could imagine what that would be like.
Hello, 21st century. Right. You are welcome at the table.
Right. So let's use those tools to help us understand what we're living through, to tell the story of God in the times that we're alive in, because this is new to us, but it's not new to God. And so then what have we been given in our tradition, in our faith, in that, like, where is God in like violent political times? Where is God in huge swathes of economic and political injustice? What does that look like? Oh, we know where God is in that. We know that God is not for that. We know that's not from or for God. We know that God is moving at pace with holiness and righteousness towards his people, so that they will be the embodiment of righteousness and of, integrity and holiness and honesty and truth. And if we don't live like that, perhaps we can pin our ears to hear that warning and be encouraged by the invitation of the Spirit to start living like it. And if we are living like that and we feel crushed by it, perhaps we can pin our ears to hear that hope is eternal and my reward is not in a system that will always fail me, but it's in a Saviour who will always deliver me.
And before I pray, like, Micah's response of mourning and lamenting is doing both of those things. It's acknowledging that this is happening, and it's turning to God with what that is. So I hope that's been helpful. Let me lead us in prayer. We love to do that on Around the Fire. We like to end with a prayer practice. I really love praying the Psalms, and we've talked about kind of all of these things as being a way of finding ourselves in the story of God and seeing who God is in that story. And so I'm just going to borrow some words from Psalm 139 and pray them. And maybe you want to kind of pray them as well, that as you consider the world that you're a part of, as you consider what's happening in the world as you're listening to this, as maybe you consider, am I complicit, or am I kind of at the mercy of those systems? Where is God in that, and where am I in that? I wonder if this might just be a really good prayer to pray from Psalm 139. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. God, thank you that you are hope, and that hope is found in you, and that, Jesus, you help us and enable us and equip us by your Spirit to follow after you. Would you help us to walk well with you, to walk closely with you, to hear the story of Micah and that idea of consequence, and seeing your righteousness and your justice outworked, God, for those places in our world and maybe even our hearts where we need to see that change, or we need to see you move. God, we want to bring those before you, and those places in our own lives, in our own internal world, Lord, where we're not yet like you. Would you shape us and form us to be like you? God, thank you that we belong to you and we belong to each other. Would you help us to have eyes to see and ears to hear what your Spirit is saying and doing, and to join in. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being with us. Come back for the next one, for Micah chapter 2. We will speak to you then. Bye.